Welcome to today's horror ghost stories. Hallucination may be V or not. I moved to this house in Turkey. We were in second floor, there's furnitures already. I lived there for about 5 to 7 months, I don't even remember. Below us there's a store. 7-Eleven, there's a roof where cats climbs and I could pet them through my window. They can even enter my room any time if I leave the window open. Adopted ABT7 cats, but only take care of them in the roof or when I go out to the store down. Ever since I moved there, I have a weird feeling, but it's like I'm used to it. When I was a kid, I used to love horror stuff so much. I loved creepypastas, I loved laughing. Jack, even now I do. Me and my brother would make some stuff we think we could communicate with our favorite creepypasta character, like an arrow, and put a yes and a no in a paper and let it move itself. It actually moved when there's no air moving them. We closed every window, lit anything that brings air into the room. The arrow still moved. We also did an Ouija board in a paper and use a cup as the thingy to move it, and would ask for our creepypasta character, or whoever we want to talk to. We always watch weird horror stuff. I was like 6 to 7 years old. I remember seeing a lady in all red walk past so fast outside the door. Even a black lady, like you can only see it for a sec, but it moved so fast. Even a white one. I walked past our bathroom, thought I saw my brother naked in the bathroom. I asked him, "Why are you there?" When I went to check again, there was no one. My brother was in the living room. We take a shower at night, which was weird for my brother. To be naked in the shower in a random afternoon, he is 4 that time, so pals don't call this weird. Or he was facing the wall. But well, there was no one told my brother about it, and he said he'd been in the living room with my brother all this time. What was I talking of? That house I live on was in the Philippines. It's an old house my dad lived in for years. I can't even count how long. IDK, but I feel like the spirit there had followed me. Beck, they only showed themselves to me. Until I was 10 or 11, moved to Turkey, I start talking to the air. It would even close a water for me, IDK, and my stuff get lost a lot like my shirts. Or you find it in random places, Ike, I wouldn't put. And once I found it, I lose it again after a day. It goes on, and I continue talking to whatever spirit I got in my room. When I was 10 to 11, I have a really bad habits, such as sleeping late or literally no sleep. I barely eat proper meals. I drink energy drinks a lot. I was so underweighted, so skinny, but still athletic. I played sports every single day and go to school like I'm doing good. It was weird, but the spirit didn't really do a lot, but it did show themselves to me few more times. And then come in when I moved to that apartment, the one where there's 7-Eleven under us, your things got weirder. Lights flickers. I hear my name getting called a lot by no one. I get weirder feeling when I'm alone. But whenever I'm in my room, no air, no nothing, I light up the candle, it start acting weird. I swear there's no air at all. Then I said, "Stop." It immediately went back to normal small light. It ain't moving like crazy, like it want to fire up my wooden study table and call me. Doors get slam a lot, clothes continue missing, all the bad habits kept on coming again. One time I even talked to the spirit again and asked, "Did you follow me from my previous house?" I use a spin wheel on my phone and it said yes. I thought it would be stuck in my old house, but it didn't. One time I decided to watch a Turkish movie. It was a real life movie, like it actually happened in real life. It was about jinns, demons and rituals and whatever more they had there. It's called Dabe 4. The Wi-Fi start acting up and it stopped working for months. We tried everything we can to get it fixed, but nope. And ever since I watched that, I kept on imagining the girl in the movie. Barely slept. Then I told the spirit in my room, "Can you please let me sleep? Get that thing in my mind away," and it did. I start getting good sleeps again. And also cats are clingier to me for some reason. I even start praying again, became more religion. I know it's weird, that's why I want to come here and get some help. What is this spirit? Explain. I'm so confused. Even now I've moved to Japan, things never changed. Also, I also smell burning smell everywhere in that house. Even now I still do. I can still hear my name getting called. Still see weird stuff and clothes missing, but it barely happens now that I've moved somewhere else. But I still talk to it for some reason. I tried to stop, but nope. Next story. The Dream Woods. I was with my friends in the woods for a hike because my friend had owned a cabin near the area, but it was late at night and my friend, let's call her Isabella, Isabella had a dumb idea. She said, hey, what if we bring the Ouija board? But we had no choice. We all just said yes until she said, I'll go get it. But when she left, I saw a lady with an axe crying, but I told myself it's my eyes playing tricks on me. But then when I stopped looking, my friends were gone. I could hear them calling my name, saying, Jade, Jade, help, help. But the first thing I heard was Jade, help them before I do, but I brushed it off, so I yelled, where are you? I see the lady with the axe. And she said, right. Under your feet, I screamed, but then I woke up in the cabin. They said, you screamed bloody murder, man. You need to... Shut up. I tried to, but I couldn't. I told them what happened. But they didn't believe me because it was a dream. But then we all started to do the normal stuff. But then we all heard something that sounded like a hurt animal. Then we all see her chopping a deer. But it was standing on its hind legs. It ran away. But the lady did. It go after it, but instead us, it ran through wall. We ran, and I am Mexican. I said, go drive away, get to your parents' house, because I thought it was the Ella Lorna, because my Tata had saw her with his own two eyes. We got to the house, but they were not there, but I saw they were outside. I was the only one in the car they talked to, Isabella's mom, because she said her father had died of all odds. I was not sad, but she was my best friend. But then I texted her dad and said he was fine and was at the movies with her mom. So I texted her mom and she said the same thing. Then I looked off my phone. They all said, get off your phone. We need to help Isabella. Her mom smiled at me. I saw red eyes. I said, guys, let's go cheer her up with a movie. Her mom said no. No, she should stay. I said, do you want to stay with your mom? No. Okay, everyone get in the car. They got in, but I didn't. Her mom said, you will regret this. I got in the car too. By the time we got to the theatre, her parents were done with the movie. And she said, Mom, Dad, how are you? Here, Mom, you were at the house saying Dad died. What her mom said, this really freaked her out. And she said, but how about we all see a deer running at us? By the time we were in the parking lot, so we ran into the woods. I fell down, got up quickly. I saw a chain link fence near the woods saying quiet and quickly go there. We did one person that was also in the woods. Got killed screaming. We all see Isabella's mom, but that was not her. And she went with the deer thing. We got out the woods safely. And to this day, I don't know what it was, but I think that it was a dream, but I don't know. They wouldn't tell me. Next story, Old Resident. The story begins when my family moved into my parents' cabin house. It was rented over the years since my father purchased it, with farmland with several acres where he would grow produce. I remember being excited since it was a 2-story house, all wooden, and my room being upstairs. It was furnished with an old rug flooring, probably a decode old. My mum wanted it remodeled, with modern wooden floors for the second floor. I remember the subflooring still had nails from the old rug, and I couldn't place any furniture or bed in my room, so I had to sleep downstairs until it was completed. I was disappointed at first, but it's worth to note the second floor consisted of 2 rooms, separated by a bathroom in the middle, and the entrance to the stairs that spiraled to the first floor. One room was painted white by the previous tenants, which angered my mum since the whole house had wooden walls, much like a cabin in the woods. Coincidentally, the painted room was mine and had a light switch with lighting. It had a wooden closet with the inside unpainted, but on the side, if the doors there, was words with RIP inscription that freaked me out. The second room, however, did not have any lighting, so it needed a lamp to be plugged in for any type of light to illuminate the room. Since there was renovation at the time, it would be a pitch-black room, and since the whole house was made of wood, each step upstairs was followed by creaks, so it was easily noticeable if someone was up there or not. My sister was staying over at friend's house, so it was only me and my parents. The first night they slept in their room, and I slept in the dining room area, which was directly underneath the upstairs room with no lighting. I grabbed my sleeping bag, making it a bit fun, since it resembled a cabin house you would find in camping grounds. The house barely furnished, so there wasn't much if light at night. I also didn't own a phone, since I was just a kid, maybe 8, 9 at the time. I woke up in the middle of the night, not knowing what time it was. I was again disappointed it wasn't morning to explore more of the house. This was short-lived, as I clearly hear creaks of footsteps right above my head. At first I thought, why was my parents up this late at night? That's when it hit me. I could hear my dad snoring in the other room where they were sleeping, and I remembered there wasn't any lighting in the room above me. So if someone were to be up there for some reason, it would be in the pitch darkness unless they had a flashlight. I peeked over towards the spiral stairs, hoping there was some evidence of light that meant it was human and otherwise normal. My sleeping bag was the kind with a waterproof exterior and would make noise whenever there was movement. I froze, petrified. I slowly covered my head inside deeper in my sleeping bag with subtle movements to not alert whatever was up there. The fear grew as I hear it move in circles. It was an empty room, so there shouldn't have been anything of interest of someone human. The realization made my heart pounding so hard, I practically felt it was as loud as the creaks I would hear. I covered my ears and tried to ignore the sounds, not daring to look and hoping it would go away. This continued for hours from what I recall, until I eventually woke up in broad daylight. I talked to my parents about the incident, and they brushed it as my imagination. I was a kid, after all. This continued over the years, and they often teased me about it. One night, after settled in my bedroom after renovations, I heard it again. Once again, I draped the blankets over my head and tried to ignore it. The creaks grew louder and finally stopped just right in front of my door. I was terrified it would try to enter my room, felt like something out of a horror film. I remember it jiggled my doorknob and I prayed I remembered to lock it. The creaks eventually faded and I was able to breathe better and gave my body an opening to go back to sleep. In the day I was more relaxed as I hardly bothered me in the daylight. I used to play marbles downstairs and loved how the marble would sound rolling across the wooden floor. That night I was woken up again, but this time I heard my marbles rolling downstairs right underneath my room where I remembered playing earlier. Whatever it was having fun, much like I was. My terror returned at the thought it was watching me, and interacting with real-world objects made my stomach curl. At this point, I always thought of ghosts as unable to interact with the real-world objects, which gave me a type, if mental shield, that if ever I came in contact, I had a reassurance that it could not touch or hurt me. This new information shattered my reassurance and made me wonder what else it could do. I would often call my parents at sunset since they would still be out sometimes running errands, and they always knew I would be more alert when the sun would go down, as was usually when the noises would begin. Eventually my parents slowly began to hear and understand my experiences wasn't made up. The worst was when one day a random older couple showed up requesting access to the property. When asked what business they had, the mention their grandmother or great one, I'm not too sure at this point, was mentioned that they passed away in this house when they owned it before. They showed a picture of the woman to the worker at the time that tended the farmland for my parents. He was jumped back at the sight of the picture because he would often have conversations with the very same woman late at night when filling up the water basin. They mentioned they simply wanted to pay their respects since they buried her in the backyard. Now the creaks and weird activity started to make more sense now. The worker remembered he would bump into the lady at night, and they would have simple conversations. She mentioned she would like to go for walks at night, and the man didn't mind the company while he finished his work for the night. We started to call her the old lady, and brought a bit of ease over the thought that it was a nice old lady rather than some gruesome murder or worse demon. I had created many theories before this, since the previous tenants must have played some Ouija board or practiced some type of witchcraft. I don't have any proof of this, but every year my parents would travel to Mexico, and when I was old enough to stay, I would stay home and often invited friends for parties, since there was no supervision at the time. This is when I learned one of my friends practiced black magic before, and although he did not like to speak about it, he would tell me it was best you don't know the truths out there, because once you can see them, they will see you and often will not leave you alone for the rest of your life. He had certain protections that he used to correct his previous mistakes, but ultimately accepted the mistakes he made and learned from it. Anyways, when he came over for the first time, he instantly noticed some type of energy if different entities. He also mentioned someone previously opened a door they shouldn't have opened and could tell they did a poor job if closing it. Saying things would be able to get through, but nothing big, luckily. He said he could attempt to close it properly but refused to singe that part of him was behind him, and I didn't push it further. At least it did confirm, at least to me, that someone did practice some type of dark magic and that the old lady wasn't harmful. I've read about spirits and entities, and there are different kinds, some playful, others harmless, and some malevolent and evil. Since it's been years and the experience is mild, I felt a calm over me that it could be a lot worse. Eventually I got used to it, and it got used to us. The experiences became less frequent, and now I since moved away, so not sure how active it is nowadays. It might not be the scariest story, but it's enough to have memories of these events take them to my grave. Next story, The Thing at the Blue Ridge Lodge. It was the summer of 2014. I was 13 when my church youth group took a retreat to the Blue Ridge Mountains. I wasn't close with any of the other kids, so I brought a friend from school named David. Looking back now, bringing a white kid who didn't speak a word of Spanish to a Hispanic youth group sounds kind of funny, but at the time, it just felt normal. The lodge we stayed at was 2 stories with a front porch that did not wrap around the whole house, only the front. There was nothing but trees on the sides. My room was at the far end of the building, one of the side rooms. That detail matters later. The first couple of days were normal. We hiked, played games, and tried to stay out of trouble. But every once in a while I'd get this strange sense of being watched. It wasn't strong enough to scare me, just enough to make me glance over my shoulder. I shrugged it off as my imagination. I should have taken it seriously. On the last night, David and I were in our room playing Uno. Most of the other kids were either downstairs or in their own rooms. It was probably around 10 p.m., maybe closer to midnight, when we suddenly heard shouting from downstairs. "A deer, a deer!" Someone yelled in Spanish. I looked at David, confused. Sure, deer are cool, but their reaction seemed too much. Then David noticed something outside our window. The moonlight was casting a long, strange shadow on the blinds. At first, I thought it was a tree. But David froze. Without saying a word, he opened the blinds. It was a deer. For a split second, I thought it was a deer. But then I realized, how could a deer reach a second-floor window? I fell back onto the floor, paralyzed. David stood rooted to the spot, staring at it. In a low whisper, so low I'm surprised I even heard him, he said, "That's no deer." Slowly, I got up and walked closer to the window. Stupid move, I know. What I saw burned into my memory. Its horns were too sharp, too bloody. One of its eyes was human, the other looked like a goat's or some kind of animal. Its teeth were bared, jagged and blood-stained, as if its cheek had been torn open. Its patchy skin oozed some kind of dark liquid that dripped down its neck. And then nothing. The next thing I remember was waking up the next morning. David and I locked eyes. We both remembered everything up to the moment I stepped to the window, but nothing after. None of the other kids heard or saw anything that night. For our own sanity, we stayed quiet. Weeks later, David and I sat down and tried to make sense of it. Could it have been a dream? A hallucination? But no, we both remembered the exact same details down to the shape of its teeth. Years later, I told the story to someone who was part of a coven. I'm not a fan of witches or people who dabble in the supernatural, just goes against what I believe in. She told me it could have been a Wendigo, a skinwalker, or even a demon marking me. That made my skin crawl. Now, I live near the Blue Ridge Mountains for school. Nothing like that has happened since. But some nights, when I'm walking back from the library to my apartment, I still feel that same heavy stare on the back of my neck. Next story. Mom let a demon into the house. While this isn't some crazy, out-of-this-world encounter like some of the other stories I've heard about with similar encounters, I admit that some of the details of what I saw are a bit blurry. However, there was a time when my mom let a demon into the house. For context, I was a kid who used to see things that others wouldn't. Thankfully, that's changed, but unfortunately, those encounters are unrelated to the story and very short, with not much to tell. Anywho, when I had these encounters, I admit I wasn't exactly scared, maybe a bit curious about what I was seeing, but that was it. However, this encounter scared me to my very core. I was in elementary school at the time, and I don't recall my age, the day, or the season.
Maybe it was summer. I'm not too sure, but I think it might have been a school night.
I lived with my mum in a one-story house at the very end of a cul-de-sac, with the right side of the house facing the street and houses to the back and left of us. The house was somewhat close to my school and my paternal grandma's house. I don't recall where my dad lived at the time because he and my mum had separated years ago, before I could even remember being part of a whole family, but he was close by and within the same state. My mum and I didn't live alone either, as we had 3 cats and 2 dogs at the time to keep us company. It was night, and my mum and I were sitting in the living room with the lamp near the couch on, watching something on TV which was on a dresser on the right side of the house. While we had curtains, the ones behind the TV stand were drawn to block out the street lamp, as the ones to the right of the back door were unnecessary and only there for decoration. I don't know where the cats were, but they weren't peeking out the blinds on the back door as they sometimes did, and the dogs were out in the backyard to do their nightly business.
I was on the floor so I could be closer to the TV, and my mom was on the couch.
I think she might have been busy with something, as I vaguely recall being at the age where staying up as late as I could was my goal. It was a quiet night like any other night, I thought, when the dogs started barking. Now that wasn't unusual, as that's what dogs do, and ours did it whenever they sensed something like a dog walking on the other side of the wall, as again, the right side of our house was next to the street. I'm not too sure what happened, but my mum had gotten up and taken the dogs barking as a sign that it was time to bring them inside for the night. So she got up, opened the door, which wasn't a sliding glass door, just a standard door with a near floor-to-ceiling glass pane in it, and called them. The thing is, it doesn't take long for the dogs to come when called or to start quieting down as they rush over, but for some reason they didn't and kept barking. I recall my mum turning on the backyard light, standing there and calling them several times, which drew my attention away from the TV. I came over, perched on one of the 2 matching armchairs in front of the window, the one to the right of the door. I mentioned to my mum how odd it seemed as I glanced out the window at the dogs through the glare of the TV and lamp and saw nothing wrong, just them on the right side, close to the back wall of the yard, barking. After a brief exchange, I tried calling the dogs too, but they kept barking and wouldn't come in. Eventually my mum had it and went outside to drag them in by the collar, leaving the door open. Now usually we don't leave the door open because we don't have a screen door, and, well, we didn't want to lose our cats. I knew this, which is probably why I was still sitting in the armchair, watching the door and the darkness outside, as my mum had turned off the backyard light at some point. That's when something formless and black rushed in as my mum was near the back wall, trying to grab the dogs because that's where they were pacing back and forth, barking yet still not coming over as I last saw. I was confused about what I had just seen, glancing around the living room and towards the dark open kitchen area, where the shadow had run to when my mum came in a couple of minutes later with the dogs, all of them getting inside before she let go of the dogs' collars, shut the door, and locked it behind them. I, still confused about what had seemingly rushed in, mentioned what I saw, but I don't recall what was said. However, my mum, in short, brushed me off. I remained a bit uneasy, but went back to my place on the floor in front of the TV to see what I missed. I thought everything was fine, and maybe it was my imagination, until I blinked and saw a pair of red eyes with what I believe was some yellow in them, with the white parts of the eye being a fiery orange. That's when I felt like my chest was freezing. Not cold freezing, but like my heart wanted to stop then and there. To put it simply, I was scared because whatever it was wasn't from anything I was watching, a sitcom, but my instinct said that it was something evil. I blinked a few times, hoping it would go away, a childish attempt really, but no.
Every time I blinked, I'd see those eyes staring right back at me. I again tried telling my mum, but she brushed me off and sent me to bed, which I didn't like, not because I wanted to stay up, but because I realized the dark was what allowed me to see the eyes.
However, I didn't want to argue with her, so I got up, bid my mum good night, and made my way into the hallway to the right of the living room, leading to the left side of the house, where the rooms were. Unfortunately, I was right with my assumption, as I could now see the eyes without blinking, and they followed wherever I turned my head. While the hallway wasn't pitch dark, it was a longish hallway with a nightlight, though it didn't do much to help me rid myself of that pair of horrid, fiery eyes following me. I recall cursing the nightlight for being useless, as I had leaned on the same wall where it was, as fear started to overtake me, and I couldn't bear to get to my room. The end of the hallway was a T section, but there were no other nightlights, only closed doors that led to dark rooms. So I stood there scared, wondering what to do,
as I didn't realize that the thing staring at me was a demon.
when I remembered something my dad had told me. Demons flee in the name of the Lord. So that's what I did. I whispered, "Satan, get thee behind me in the name of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Saviour." And just like that, the dread and fear that filled me disappeared. I was a bit whiplashed by the feeling, but taking a chance, I blinked, and the eyes were gone. I looked around too, trying to see if they'd appear again and follow me, but they didn't, and I felt relieved, despite the memory still being fresh. I was then able to head to my room, luckily avoiding any conflict with my mom about why I was lurking in the hallway, and sleep. I later told my dad about the encounter and what I thought the entity was. A demon, something I realized after I called upon the Lord's name. He believed me and thought the same, though my mom never did. But when I was older, she did mention that something was wrong in the house when we first moved in, saying that she recalls one of the cats staring at the shelf above the fake fireplace, which is in the living room behind the couch, but when she looked, nothing was there, and that she saw her shoes moving on their own near the back door. She also claims to have gone around the house with her Bible, citing scripture to cleanse it. I'm not entirely sure I believe her encounter, as she was blind to the demon she let in, but who am I to judge? At least I don't live there anymore and haven't encountered anything like that since then, though I will never forgive her for letting that demon in. Next story. More weird things. Okay, so last time I put one of these stories in, it was 9 or so months in the past. This thing happened to me tonight, so I have a part-time job up the road at my neighbour's farm, and it's about 30 acres or so significantly larger than mine and my family's. Essentially, all I have to do is throw hay to 4 cows and a goat in one paddock and water them, move to the next paddock and give that goat water and hay, move to the next paddock and give that goat water and hay, move to the next paddock and give the horse the same thing, then move on to the last paddock and give those 2 steers water and hay. A fairly simple job for $70 for a 5-day work week. One of my neighbours and I, we'll call her O for her privacy, were talking about paranormal stuff we've heard about 5 minutes after I'd gotten there. She said that she heard babies crying a lot when there was no one near enough for her to hear any of the neighbours' kids. We did a bit of research after that and found that it couldn't be a cougar or any birds. I found that really odd. Anyway, she said that her wife, yes, they're lesbian, get over it, we'll call her M for privacy, had seen some really weird stuff around, like deer acting like, well, not like normal deer, coyotes being larger than they should, stuff like that. After that, O went in to cook her and M's dinner and feed their hunting dogs.
I got to work.
As I worked, everything was normal until I was about to leave.
As I went to leave, everything just went dead silent, and I got that really, really bad feeling like I was being hunted. I got my quad going quickly, and that too was just
almost entirely silent. Keep in mind it was a really windy day and should have heard the cows mooing,
or the horse neighing, or the goats bleating,
or the wind blowing around the leaves, or something, but there was nothing at all, besides a distant background noise, like a nature sound video on YouTube with the sound only set to 10 and you're in the next room. I looked toward the back of their property instinctively, which was a lot like mine, just bigger, and I saw it. That fucking deer thing. Just standing there on 2 legs this time, looking the exact same, just a bit more, decayed and emaciated. I looked at it for only a moment and tore off on my quad,
I wasn't going to stay there with that thing any longer than I had to.
Once I got to my house, I quickly called O and told her to stay inside. Here's how I remember the call. I'm going to use my online name for what she says. Kapu? Why are you calling me?
You were just here. No time to explain. Just don't go outside and keep your dogs in too. Why, what's wrong? Is there a wolf or cougar out there or something?
No, it's a deer.
But not just...
Trust me, okay? Okay, I will. What about M? Just make sure she goes straight inside and doesn't look toward the back of your guy's property. You should do the same. All right, bye. Bye. Then we both hung up and haven't talked since. I think that the sounds only start when you see the deer thing. Anyway, thanks for reading this, you guys.
Stay safe out there.
There's a lot we don't know about this world we live in, even if we've been here for thousands of years. And honestly, I have no clue if this deer thing is a skinwalker, wendigo, or not deer. Next story: terrifying sleep paralysis, hallucination, or demonic encounter. Ever since I was young, I have always been intrigued by the paranormal and have an undying love for all things horror and scary. I'd always hang on the words of people recounting cryptid sightings or hauntings they've experienced by either ghosts, poltergeists, or demons. They always sounded exciting to me, even when the person talking about their experience is clearly upset or deeply disturbed. But of course it's all fun and games until it happens to you. This event happened relatively recently and thought it would be worth sharing while it's still fresh in my mind. Although if we're all being honest here, which I can assure you I am, this absolutely terrifying thing will be forever etched in the wrinkles of my mind.
It was awful.
But first, a little bit of background. I am a 27-year-old female and reside in Central Virginia. Around this time last year, I was finally able to leave the nest and move in with my partner. For security's sake, we'll call him Peter. Over the last year, I have been under a lot of stress between losing my job immediately after moving in with Peter. And since I have not been able to find permanent employment yet, it's an ongoing process of constantly applying for jobs, going to 1 or 2 interviews and then getting a rejection email or call. I'm sure some of you can relate there. Another thing that you should know is I have a history with anxiety disorder. I have recently been put on medication, given an emergency inhaler, and am finally getting to see a psychiatrist in the upcoming weeks. Normally, the most I'll experience with my anxiety is the normal list of symptoms: abnormally fast heart rate, tightness in my throat and chest, shortness of breath, and most nights, insomnia. Occasionally, I'll get something unusual if the stress is high enough, like breaking out into what's called stress rash, which is basically breaking out in hives like you would if you were around something you were allergic to.
Lucky me, one of my top allergens is copious amounts of stress.
Yay, now on to the actual events that took place about 2 months ago. One evening, Peter and I were doing our usual nightly routine of lounging about on the bed with the lights dimmed while we're winding down for the night in our respective ways. For Peter, this would normally be either playing Minecraft or preparing the next week's session for our Pathfinder campaign. For me, I crochet to my heart's content while listening to creepypastas or true scary stories. That
Night, instead of taking some sleeping pills to help ease myself to
sleep, I decided to make a mixed drink and let the alcohol do its job. I only made and drank the one drink, which, if I remember right, was a concoction of Captain Morgan's watermelon rum and some orange juice. Nothing fancy. After I finished my drink, I began to feel sleepy, so I decided to call it a night.
especially since I had a very early morning ahead of me.
So Peter turned out the lights, and we laid there, waiting for sleep's sweet embrace. Here's when things started to get freaky. As I'm lying there staring at the ceiling, my vision started to get fuzzy, and the room began to spin.
I remember thinking to myself, what the hell? I only had one drink, and it only had a shot's worth of rum in it. Why is this happening? Note that I had taken my last dose of anxiety medicine hours before I made the drink, and
Didn't take anything else, so there was no chance that the
alcohol mixed with any medications. Then things got even weirder. I started seeing colors.
everything was shrouded in oil, slick like colors, bright purple, greens and yellows.
I was really starting to get concerned at this point, thinking that I was having a bad reaction to the alcohol or something like that. But that shouldn't be.
I come from Irish and Scottish decent, and I can more than handle my fair share of booze. I looked over to Peter, and he was snoring his life away. But when I turned back to my side of the bed, I froze. The previously brightly coloured room was now black, with a faint reddish lighting. It was dead quiet.
And there, sitting on top of the dresser about 8 feet away from me, is a demon.
I was thinking, holy shit, no, this can't be real, but it didn't go away. It just sat there.
Hooved legs crossed, staring hard into me and smiling.
I was too scared to move and too scared to look away.
I was scared stiff, and I'll never forget what it looked like.
It had dark, oily black skin, claws and horns.
I mean, really black. It was the darkest black I've ever seen.
Even darker than the darkness surrounding it. It had 2 sets of horns on the top of its head, a set of large bull-like horn and a set of smaller pointed horns just beside the larger ones. Its teeth were even black and were sharp and pointed.
Kind of like the teeth you see on an anglerfish, except they were all the same size.
It licked its teeth with its dark red tongue, but its eyes...
God, the eyes were the worst.
It had 3 of them. There were 2 red eyes with the pupils like a goat's eyes, and 1 eye in the middle of its forehead that glowed white hot. I couldn't believe what was happening. Was this real? Was I going crazy?
I wanted it to end.
It was about that moment when the demon narrowed its eyes at me, smirking.
Then it did something I still cannot figure out why it happened.
It raised its left hand and snapped its fingers. The snap seemed to echo throughout the room and reverberate in my head. After the sound died, he was gone, and I snapped out of whatever trance or illusion I was under. The room was back to normal. No spinning, no oil slick colours, and aside from the faint light coming from the bathroom, it was still dark. I jolted so hard that Peter immediately woke up with a start and asked if I was okay. I started to shake and sob. I was sobbing so hard that I couldn't breathe. Peter frantically started looking for my inhaler and then handed it to me. I took 3-4 deep puffs from it and then continued to cry. I told him what happened and about what I saw, and he looked about as disturbed as I did.
After that, there was no way in hell that I was going back to sleep anytime soon.
I was scared, jumpy, very paranoid. I stayed up for several more hours, scrolling through Pinterest, before I was finally able to drift back to sleep from exhaustion. 3 hours later, my alarm went off, and I groggily groaned. I was in no shape to tackle the day, so I turned it off and made all the necessary calls so that I could cancel the day's plans and try to go back to sleep. I'm still not quite sure what exactly it was that happened. Peter suspects it might have been an episode of sleep paralysis, even though I have no history of experiencing anything like that. Normally during sleep paralysis, you cannot move your body no matter how hard you try. But the thing is, I probably could have moved if I hadn't been so scared. It's still possible, since I had been under a good deal of stress, and I could have hallucinated it, but I'm still not certain. I tried to do some research to see if there are any known demons who fit that description, but have come up empty-handed. If anyone else has seen or heard of this demon, please let me know. I would feel better knowing I wasn't crazy or imagining it. Next story, it was waiting outside. I grew up in a remote village in Romania, out in the middle of nowhere. Don't imagine beautiful forests, lush gardens and apple orchards and Dracula's castle, because it is not even close. This is the kind of place where the nights are too quiet, too long, too cold, and the forest feels like it's waiting to swallow you whole. My grandparents raised me out there. They had a pretty big house, split in 2 sections with about 200 meters of yard in between. Grandma and I mostly spent out days in the main building, the one facing the street. It was surrounded by a gorgeous veranda with beautiful rugs and flower pots. We had hanged fairy lights all around, as all throughout the summer we slept on the sofa outside. Grandpa, on the other hand, lived his days in a small cottage on the part of the property where they kept the animals. Few horses, cows, a ton of chickens, ducks and turkeys, and of course, Their feed, silos with grains and hay. Since we were so close to the forest, foxes and polecats would come to steal chickens and eggs. Wild boars will smash onto the fences, and the usual dumb bear would stumble through the garden in an attempt to steal some food. They did have guard dogs, maybe 4 or 5 boulder of fur and drool, but it was not enough. Grandpa had to be out there. Now, the one thing about that property that I hated more than the stupid turkeys was the outhouse.
We only had one.
And it sat up the slope about 200 meters away from me, and Grandma slept near the silos and Grandpa's cabin. 200 meters doesn't sound like much, but when you're 14 years old, walking that stretch in the dark with all sorts of noises around you, it just feels like a nightmare. It was autumn, cold enough that my breath came out in clouds, the air smelling of wet leaves and dirt. That night, the wolves were howling in the forest, something not exactly unusual, but tonight our dogs answered them, barking and howling like they were losing their minds. My grandmother always said that a howling dog was a bad omen. She said they knew when evil things were near.
I never really believed her.
It was my fault for getting out of the house in the first place, but I needed to go to the bathroom. The moon that night was swollen, hanging heavy over my head. Not quite full, but bright enough to strip the darkness away and lay everything bare. In that part of the village, shadows were safer than light, and the glow of it didn't just show me the land. It showed the land me on top of the corn silo. I saw it. A shape crouched there, massive, hunched, covered in rough grey and brown fur that looked ragged in the moonlight.
Its eyes caught the light, burning yellow, locked straight on me. It made my stomach turn.
The part I focused on the most in that moment of terror, that I can still see when I close my eyes, were its feet. Huge, paw-like things ending in claws, dog claws, hanging heavy over the edge of the silo. I forced myself to walk to the bathroom, every step slow, like I was praying not to disturb its peace. I shut the door carefully, locked it, disappearing from under its eyes.
I sat there in the dark, with my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold the handle.
My fingertips turning white from the tightness of my grasp. I could hear the footsteps outside, slow, steady, crunching against the gravel. Not boots, not shoes. Something heavier, something with claws. It kept moving around and around the outhouse, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, like it was toying with me. And over it all, I could hear it breathing.
Low, wet, steady.
It wasn't sniffing for me. It already knew I was in there. I bit onto my hand just to stop myself from making a sound.
I crouched there, holding that flimsy door shut, tears running down my face, knowing if it wanted in, there was nothing I could do to stop it. At some point, I must have blacked out.
When I opened my eyes again, it was morning. My grandmother was pulling me up off the floor. My eyes were swollen from crying, and my hand was torn open where I'd bitten into it. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't. All she told me was that the dogs hadn't stopped howling. Not once. Not until right before dawn. Next story. You never know who you work with. Hello first. I want to say I enjoy listening to your podcast while I work. And one day, while listening to Tales from the Break Room, I remember the story of husband and his co-worker. My husband worked at a warehouse with only 3 employees. One of them was around our age in his late 20s, the other was an older white man in his 50s. My husband wouldn't say much about the older man other than he was very knowledgeable and a good worker. One day while I was at work, my phone was blowing up, and it was my husband telling they couldn't find his co-worker. The older white male, let's call him Joe, he said that Joe's mother went up to the warehouse asking when was the last time they saw him. Everyone was confused because he had been at work the previous day and nothing was out of the ordinary. Then Joe's wife called my husband to also ask if they noticed anything yesterday or if he mentioned he was going somewhere. Turns out he never went home. Then, hours later, Joe's wife called again to tell us, and they found him with a shot in his head in a place nearby their home. Side note, The place is called the Goatman's Bridge, where a lot of bad people go to do bad things. It's located in Denton, TX, a college town not far from Dallas, TX. The history of that bridge is pretty dark. My husband and his other co-worker were extremely shocked and sad since they knew him as being a great worker and family man. But then they decided to Google him. Something we should do if our co-workers don't talk much about their lives. Turns out that he had been caught a couple of months prior for soliciting a minor that ended up being an undercover cop. He posted bail and was let out on bond. My husband and his co-worker were shocked, especially because that had happened while he was working there. Okay, so this is where it gets scary. When talking about him, my husband brought up how he would always wear the same clothes, always dressed in all black shirt, jeans and boots, which is a bit odd, but according to my
husband, who doesn't watch enough crime documentaries,
said it wasn't. My husband also starts to tell me that once he told him how he accidentally found a dead body near his home, he proceeds to tell my husband that while he went on his daily walk, he ran into a body that had been left near a lake. He said he reported it to the police, and they asked him a lot of questions, and he didn't get home until late because the cops were asking him a lot of questions. My husband said that he just told him that was crazy and that's it. Well, turns out he only told my husband that story. Once at their warehouse, they had hired a temporary worker to help out, and that guy would always tell my husband how he got a weird feeling from Joe and how he believed Joe could be a serial killer. My husband just brushed it off when that co-worker brought up his weird behavior of always wearing the same clothes and being extremely quiet and just observing. After his body was found, detectives went to the warehouse and picked up his work cell phone and computer. They were going to go through them and see if they found anything useful to solve his murder. The main detective on the case was talking to my husband, who brought up how not too long ago Joe mentioned a dead body he had found, and the detective told him he knew about that because he was also the main detective in that case that has not been solved yet. My husband then did start to think he was a bit odd, and the way he was murdered also was not just an accident. He was shot behind his head, and they had also found drugs in his vehicle. After finding out that he was involved in some dark stuff, my husband did start to feel some type of way. You really don't know who you work with all the time until something bad happens. Next story, 2, Wendigo in Pennsylvania. Hi, my name is Sam Swimley. This took place in Mansfield, Pennsylvania. This is the first time I'm posting this story. I was walking home one night from work. I worked at the fast food restaurant Wendy's right across the road. It was a full moon that night, so I could see literally everything. I had my headphones on and music playing on my phone. I looked down the field to a lone tree towards the woods at the other end of the field.
I see these two really tall figures. I could see their white eyes. I could see the deer skulls on their heads. I knew exactly what they were.
These Wendigo had to be about 10 feet tall. Luckily, I was close to the house. I wasn't even scared of them. I felt a connection with them somehow. Now, I'm Cherokee Native American. My adoptive family is Algonquin speaking. I walked into the trailer me and my birth mother lived in. I didn't say a word to anyone. Where I live now, I'm surrounded by woods in the Allegheny Mountains.
I've been hoping to run into another one. I've seen a Bigfoot for the second time, though not what I was hoping for. I know we have a Wendigo in the woods here somewhere.
My best chance to find another Wendigo would be in the winter, since they're known to cause blizzards. But the first time I entered the woods here, I noticed bones scattered on the woods floor, and how quiet it was.
I got excited.
I was armed with a silver pocket knife, which works on a Wendigo if you don't have a flare gun. Now and then I go for nightly walks along the snowmobile trail in town. I usually feel like I'm being watched and followed, but I just smile about it and keep walking. Sometimes I hear a rustle in the trees or a branch break as I'm walking. There was one walk where there was something to my right in the patch of woods, but I didn't see anything, and the wind was picking up, which usually means a storm is coming. But this felt different, more sinister. Then I heard the growling.
I laughed and growled back to assert dominance. Then there it was.
The Wendigo showed itself to me. Then it spoke.
Are you not scared? Honestly, I wasn't scared, not one bit. I said to it, no, I'm not. I know what you are. I didn't mind the smell of the Wendigo. I've lived on a farm before, and I've smelled worse than this Wendigo. I woke up the next morning with some scratches on my body, and I had no idea where they came from.
I just shrugged them off.
Every once in a while, I swear see it in my apartment.
When I'm showering, it messes with the lights. When I have my bedroom door open, it stays in the living room. With my bedroom door closed, it can't pass through due to a very powerful protection rune on the door.
As I'm typing this, I can see it and feel it. I've found that white sage keeps it in check. I've got white sage incense, just in case if it tries to hurt me. I think it's protecting me from something or someone for some reason.
It's got its massive claw on my left leg as I'm still typing this. So yeah, that's my Wendigo story. Thank you. Next story, a weird 2 nights. I go by Kapu online, and this is probably the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me in my life, ever. Here's the scoop on what happened. This happened about 9 or 10 months ago, by the way, so I used to always go on these midnight walks on the back of my property. Don't ask why. I just like the quiet after a long day. I live on 20 acres of high desert in eastern Washington. All I'd ever seen back there were rock, dirt, sagebrush, small stubby trees, and the occasional owl, fox, elk, or deer in the 3 years I'd lived there. Then this one night, I'm walking to go back there, and I start to get this weird feeling like a deep, dark pit had just opened up in my stomach. I ignored it, thinking that the deer with the broken front knee that I'd had to put down just that morning had just put me on edge. So, about 20 feet past the gate that led to the back of my property, about at the dry creek bed that always runs with water in late winter to late spring. Sometimes early summer, if we're lucky, I stop, hearing a weird noise like dry bones or branches breaking. I looked out across the creek, and not 10 feet away from me was this deer. It was standing on all fours and just staring at me, not showing an ounce of fear. The longer I looked at that deer, the worse that pit in my stomach got. I got a feeling of intense danger almost immediately. And the more I looked at it, the more wrong that deer looked. The first thing I started to notice was the eyes. They weren't like normal deer eyes, no. They were facing forward. I know some deer's eyes face more forward than others, but this was different. They were close, like human eyes, and it kind of freaked me out. Then I noticed the limbs. They were long, longer than a normal deer, even a lanky one. Think maned wolf or other animals like that.
And the joints were all wrong.
Like there were too many of them. Or the legs were all broken in a bunch of different places. Or like it was disfigured really weirdly. I don't know how long I was standing there.
Eyes locked with it, but I thought it was just about 5 minutes.
It finally turned and walked off. But I guess jerked off would be a more accurate description, like it wasn't used to walking. Like a newborn fawn, I guess. Once it was gone, way out of sight, I ran back inside, didn't look back one single time. When I got back inside, I locked all the doors, windows, anything that could be opened, just in case, but not before glancing at the clock. It was 5 in the morning. I had been out there for at least 3 to 5 hours. Then the next night I was like, what am I, a mouse? And I decided to go back out there and bring one of my hunting rifles, just in case. When I got back there, I stopped at the creek bed and waited for a while. I didn't see anything, and of course, I was too dumb to bring a flashlight or night vision binoculars. But just as I was about to leave, I happened to glance up at the hill that the end of my property ended at the top of.
And I see this
Pale figure walking along the ridge on all fours in the moonlight. Its limbs seemed disjointed, its movements jerky like the deer's, but 10 times worse.
And I got the worst feeling I'd ever gotten in my life, worse than even when I was with the deer. The moment I looked away, I ran, faster than I ever had in my life.
And now I refuse to ever go back there at night, ever again, unless the situation is life or death.
I have no idea what the heck those things were, and I don't want to encounter them ever again.
But ever since then, there's been these sounds outside of my room at night, like branches or bones breaking, like that first night before the deer. But there are no trees anywhere near my house. And one night, there was scraping just on the other side of my wall.
My dog started snarling suddenly, and I swear I heard something tapping on the forest. This is still happening to this day.
but it slowly faded to a much lower noise than those first 2 months. But I now refuse to go outside at night anymore. Thank anyone who reads this. I appreciate it. Bye. Next story, The Demon in My Walls. His is not really a scary story, and I'm not even sure if this thing really is a demon or just some spirit. But let's dive into this. This all happened when I was 12, 14 years old and living in a small village about half an hour away from the next big city. From when I was younger, I never truly felt alone in my own home. It was less of an eerie or dreadful presence, but rather something living in the house with us, minding its own biasness. It never revealed itself to me, but it let its presence be known. My parents still blame me for the things that happened. Some examples for things happening are seeing shadows move in the corner of my view, hearing footsteps or other man-made noises around the house, even though I was alone at home, hearing doors slam without any wind to have caused it, lights, phones, etc. suddenly malfunctioning, food, mainly snacks disappearing and things moving around before I could blame some of the random noises on my pet rabbit. But after she passed, some of the noises remained. I was always the one blamed for missing food. Since it always did harmless stuff and even spared important things like money, for example, I started calling it our little poltergeist. Funnily, I could somehow communicate with it.
I'm not sure if anybody else could or even tried for that matter. I don't even know if it really understood me.
Or just knew what I thought or wanted. I can't describe it good enough. So here's an example. I have 2 small rabbit figurines to memorialize my 2 pet rabbits along other ones, like game characters and stuff like that, on my desk. But these 2 in particular stood separate from the rest. All of the figurines moved around frequently, but I could explain it by the cables of my mouse or keyboard shoving them around when moved. These 2, however, couldn't have been moved accidentally by some cables, and I surely didn't move them. I told it off by saying something like, "You can move the other ones as much as you like, but these stay exactly as they are now, okay?" Or do they have remained still to this day? Another example, in which it is either a bit more bored or just wanted to annoy me, would be when I came home from a long day of school and made myself some food. While I was waiting for the food to get ready, I repeatedly heard her doors slamming and quiet footsteps upstairs.
I yelled at it to keep quiet because every time a door slammed, I thought my parents would have come home, and it actually stopped for a few minutes before starting all over again.
This repeated for 4 to 5 times before I gave up. Now I have plenty more examples, but these should do just fine. I still live in the same house, but the activity has calmed down noticeably. Just some things moving, food disappearing, and some noises. Even the footsteps are less frequent.
Almost as if it just wants to remind me of its presence every once in a while so I don't forget it. I have absolutely no idea what this thing is, and as long as it stays as calm as it did until now,
I honestly have no problem with it. I have tried telling my parents, but they say I'm imagining stuff and continue to blame me for some of the activity. What do you think about this? I'd love to hear your theories on what it might be. Next story, My Skinwalker is Waiting. I wasn't expecting to write this, but it has come to my attention that we are not alone here. There are incomprehensible things that most people wouldn't see in this lifetime.
I'm writing this to show you what I know.
I don't know what they are, but the research I am doing is the key to a seemingly impossible door to open.
My suspicion started when I was outside at night with my cousin.
We were joking about being watched. Little did we know we were.
I only saw it for a second, but soon my thoughts were surrounded by the horror of the creature.
It had elongated limbs that bent in awkward positions, the sunken eyes hauntingly staring. Soon after, my interpretation of the world around me shifted. There was a deeper meaning to the story, and I was determined to find out what. My mind became a hellscape of confusion and fear. The creature had a familiar vibe around it that came in waves. I decided to research it matched the description of a skinwalker. I haven't been able to shake the feeling of being watched since. This creature is always watching, even if I don't see it. I decided to give it a name, John. It's never tried to harm me. I haven't talked to my cousin about it, but I know he remembers and feels the same way. I remember the creature looking distressed, as if in uncontrollable pain. It made no noise, just watched and waited. My cousin and I ran back to my house. My parents thought we were delusional. No one had ever believed me since I gave up telling people. I'm honestly scared. Here is some information for anyone who is experiencing similar problems. In folklore, skinwalkers are vulnerable to silver weapons, powerful magic, and significant damage, silver. Weapons skinwalkers can be killed by silver, bullets or knives to the heart or head, powerful. Magic shamans can perform rituals and spells to turn a skinwalker's evil back on them. Covering the body with corn pollen, cedar, ash, or juniper berries can protect against skinwalkers. Significant damaged skinwalkers can die if they are significantly damaged. Tracking a skinwalker back to their human identity can lead to their defeat. Other beliefs skinwalkers avoid the light. Skinwalkers can absorb themselves into a person's body if they lock eyes. Skinwalkers respond to night whistling, causing harm to those who encounter them. Extra disguise themselves as animals. They are deeply feared by the Navajo, and it is considered bad luck to say their name. The belief in skinwalkers is a core part of Navajo culture and is connected to many other ceremonial and life-way understandings. Skeptics say there is no solid evidence that anything unusual has happened at Skinwalker Ranch, which has been the subject of many paranormal claims. Stay safe and calm in the unlikely event of an encounter with one. Panic will make you lose control. My advice would be to stay inside at night and listen closely for scratching, barking, screaming, or even crying. These are common noises that skinwalkers make to attract people. If you feel uncomfortable in a place, leave. This is a drawing of John. I did, digitally. I'm not sure if it looks exactly like him, but it gives an idea of what I saw. I've been drawing the same thing.
Over and over again after seeing John, I've always been
Inspired by horror and have a natural talent for drawing it, but this is getting out of
hand. Next story, the ghost at my
cousin's house. This happened at my cousin's house. For some backstory, I was staying there because I was moving at the time, and I was super excited to visit my cousin regardless.
And I think I was around 12. I get sleep paralysis. I saw a ghost, and though that it was sleep paralysis.
But I could move, and I was really confused. It was walking around in a gorgeous dress, and when it took a mask off, she had a beautiful face, but one half of it looked melted, and her dress turned into a burned and tattered thing. And then she approached me and phases through me, but I straight up felt the wind. The next night I saw her as a child, or maybe it was her child, but it was the same thing. Takes off a mask, and everything seemed burned. The next night, I saw the same thing, but with an old lady. The next night, I saw a 20-year-old man with a candle, but at the time I didn't realize that it was a ghost. This one scared me the most due to the fact that I was SA'd in that same year, so this scared the living tea out of me. I saw him light the floor on fire. I proceeded to hear crying from a child, a mother calming her, a grandmother praying, and I finally put the pieces together. I also woke up with a small burn mark. Nothing else happened for the last day I was there, and I thought that maybe I had just been having nightmares. But about 2 years later, 6 months ago, my cousin said that she had seen the women at different times, but then her mum, my aunt, said that she had seen the man, and the child and the dad, my uncle, said that he had seen the man several times and only seen the child and the old lady. I just got lucky and saw all three. They had moved out of that house about a year after my experience, and then lived in another place for 8 months, and now live somewhere else. But about 2 months ago, we went into the history of that house after seeing the child in the mask in the background of a video. We figured out that about 200 years ago, the previous house there had belonged to a couple with a child who lived with the woman's mum. The man and woman got into a fight, and the man attempted to burn the house down. And it didn't work, and only ended up scarring the child. In the same spot I found the burn mark, But the second time it did work. K1L1, the three girls, they had just come home from a masquerade.
They were buried there, and a new house was built on top of the site. I still have the scar from that burn, which is the only way I can prove to myself that it really happened.
I've had a few other ghost experiences, but that is the one that has always stuck with me. I am obsessed with the paranormal and have been since the age of 8. I always wanted a paranormal experience, but when I finally got one, I simultaneously wanted more.
And never wanted another one again.
I am now in the later years of high school and am looking at colleges on the East Coast. Maybe I will get some more stories there, but we will see. So in short, I never know what I will find at a family member's house when I'm trying to move. Next story. I got chased by a skinwalker in the hollers of Kentucky. I was a 17-year-old boy when this happened to me, but I'm 22 now and I moved far away now.
I live in the hollers of Somerset, Kentucky.
It was a weekend and was during when school was starting back again. It was a nice and cool outside. I had gotten a text from my friend DJ saying that him, Marshall and Amanda wanted to hang out tonight. I said sure and told them I'll bring some booze with me. I opened my window and took my bag and tossed it out the window, trying to be careful not to make too much noise. I snuck out of my window, put my bag on and started watching down my driveway to go hang out with some friends from school. I had a long walk ahead of myself. It was like a 3-4 mile walk to go play some basketball with them. I was tried already from going down and up hills and carrying a bag on my back with some booze I stole to drink with my friends. But I still played some basketball with them anyway.
After we got done and I was heading back home,
I was listening to the nature around me, but when I was going up the road leading to the woods that surrounded me on both sides, I smelled something like rotten flesh and something that felt like it was choking the breath out of me. I just kept on walking, but a little bit faster.
I don't realize until I got all the way to the top of the road that it was quiet, too quiet. I was kind of scared at this moment because I know we have bears and mountain lions where I lived.
I just took my phone out to listen to some spiritual music to empower me not to stop no matter what. Then I heard something like a hurt animal. I turned on my flashlight and I saw a shadow moving in the wood line. What I did next I wished I didn't do.
I started to run because I felt something watching me from the woods around me. I looked behind me and I saw it.
Its arms was like gorilla arms, but longer with 4 inches, claws for nails. Its head looked like deer, but sharp teeth and skin falling off its face. It was running at me. It could reach out and grab me if it wanted to. I thought of a plan to keep it away from me. I took my bag off and grabbed one of the bottles and a rag that I had, and I made a Molotov while running.
I took my bag, fling it back on my back. I took my lighter out of my pocket, almost dropping it, and lit the rag, and I threw the Molotov at that thing.
It didn't like it at all. It took off and jumped off the bridge that was behind me as I kept running and running until I made it home. When I made it home, I stopped to catch my breath and to listen to the nature around me. I was glad to hear the crickets, frogs, and owls again, but the best part was that horrible smell was gone. The next morning, I looked at my bag and saw that it was cut like someone took knife to it.
I never snuck out again because I know if I did, I wouldn't be here telling my story.
If you do go out for a walk at night in the hollers of Kentucky, just remember that thing could and will catch up to you no matter how fast you can.
Run. Next story, the creature of Rothi. I'm going to keep names and location mostly hidden for
privacy, but I will say this takes place in the south of the United States. The most accurate description I've heard about where I live was from an outsider saying the trees are hiding something, which should tell you how eerie it can be at times. As I've grown up here, I've seen many weird things and heard noises that shouldn't be made from anything in this world. One example being when I was young, probably 8 years old, I saw a silhouette of a person walk into the one directly across. It was solid black and featureless, maybe around 6 feet tall. It paid no attention to me whatsoever, though. Other times I've seen things that look like demons scurrying around and disappearing before I can look at them directly. My family has labeled me as the one who sees a bunch of things and call me schizophrenic at times whenever I tell them about some of the things I've seen. Out of all of the things I've seen, though, the one I am about to tell you has shaken me up the most.
I think it was around winter last year in 2024. I was 15 and my little sister 11. I was sitting in my room, drawing completely in the zone. I am an artist and I enjoy drawing monstrous creatures.
I do not remember what I was drawing at the time, but while I felt a gaze upon me out of nowhere. I was frozen from fear, and my brain was screaming at me to hide. I had a feeling something was staring at me from my window, but I was too afraid to move and look. A few moments later, I felt a relief as if whatever it was had left. I told no one about it because they would have just brushed it off as one of my schizophrenic moments, so there really was no reason to bother trying. I then tried to brush it off as well in a way to cope because I was reasonably shaken. Later, as the evening drew near, my little sister was asking me to play with her. Since I rarely do anymore due to me being a recluse, I agreed, feeling bad for her. We agreed to play a few rounds of hide and seek, since our property is kind of big, but we of course set boundaries.
No hiding in trees since I am better at climbing than her.
No hiding in the woods or tall grass because of snakes, and no going too far away from the yard because we had dangerous animals around such as coyotes, bobcats, bears, mountain lions, and a panther somewhere around. It eventually got to where my little sister was the seeker, so I went off to hide. I crouched behind our old empty propane tank that was pushed over by a row of large hedge bushes the size of small trees. Around that area was a field, and then a woodland. As I was crouched behind the tank, I felt a heavy gaze lock onto me as if it was staring through my very soul. It made my stomach drop to the floor and my legs grow weak.
As I was frozen in place, I smelt a disgusting smell of rot worse than any I've ever smelt before.
It was like a pile of large, rotting animals that have sat inside a hot metal shed for a few weeks.
Followed by it all, I heard a voice call out to me. It sounded like my dad, but wrong. It was distorted and staticky.
The words he said were, "Hey, Gabriel."
And then again, "Hey, Gabriel."
I turned my head around, hoping to see that my dad just snuck up on me, but there was nothing there. I then remembered my dad hadn't even came home from work yet, and if he had, he would be hunting.
I do everything I can and force my legs to run because I felt as if I had stayed. Something would have showed itself and it would be the last thing I see. I ran to my sister faster than I had ever ran before and I took her inside.
My mum and older sister see the panic in my expression and ask what it wrong, and I mistakenly told them what happened when I should have just said, "I saw a mountain lion." They laughed at me and told me it was probably my imagination. My little sister went outside onto the back porch yelling out, "Come get me, monster!" then came back inside to mockingly say, "See, there is nothing there." It upsets me, but I would rather her be inside disbelieving me than being outside with whatever scared me. So, later my dad came home and took my little sister hunting with him. They shot a deer and brought it home from our woods. They were skinning it on our hill and asked me to help. The sun was set enough to where you needed a flashlight to see and could not see far.
As I sat there helping them, I swear I saw something tall, inhumanly tall. Walking in the field, I heard the voice from earlier that day.
It was too dark for me to see any details, but it was maybe around 8 to 10 feet tall and walking on 2 legs. It seemed too skinny to be a bear and too tall to be a human. Foolishly, I got curious and wanted to investigate. But then I was stopped by a loud and unfamiliar voice in my head that said in a deep and stern tone, "Don't poke your head where it doesn't belong," warning me, a guess.
I don't know if it was just me, some other creature protecting me, or even God. That was not the last time I have felt the creature of rot's gaze and smelt its awful stench.
I gave it that name because it was the most fitting for what I experienced. I don't know what it is, be it a Wendigo, a demon, or something else, but it should not exist in this world. I once got fed up with it. On a day I felt as if I walked a certain path. I'd meet it and die, and I got an axe determined to kill it, but soon talked myself out of it. I'm glad I did, because while listening to this podcast, frightened by people's similar experiences, I heard a story of a man who tried to shoot one, and it didn't even hurt the creature. If I encountered a creature that can tank guns like it's nothing and shred bears to pieces, my flimsy little axe wouldn't be able to do anything. That's all I really have to tell about this encounter. I will remind you the few names said were changed, and if you ever feel like going somewhere will lead to a bad situation, always listen to that feeling. It will definitely save your life one day. Stay safe out there in this world with creatures we can't even begin to understand. And good night. Next story, Shrine of Dagon. As I myself am writing this message under unappreciable mental strain, by tomorrow I shall be no more. My food supply as well as medicine and water had been running out. I've been stuck on this life raft for a few days, floating lonely in the middle of the Indian Ocean, 100 miles away from the mainland. A day ago, our ship was wrecked by a great storm, ravaged by a twisted thunder along with massive ocean waves, sinking the boat into the pitch-black bottom of the ocean, as well as many unlucky crews on it. I considered myself to have a fortune to survive from the danger. Tragically, I did survive from a thunderstorm, only to realize that I've been separated from the other. In a rush, I used an only last emergency life raft to rescue my life from such a disastrous scenario. When I found myself floating on a lifeboat out of nowhere in the unbroken blue, with a few supplies which I brought during evacuation, now my supply had been running out.
I thought to myself that I am going to die lonely on this floating thing.
Nowhere near right at the edge of the world. When I look up as the sun goes down from the horizon into a mysterious west, it gives me a moment when I used to be a young man who had a dream that one day he could become a sailor, traveling across the ocean globe to the corner of the world where the sky cannot be reached. I have to spend the night sharing my thoughts to deal with desperation. While my raft steady on the surface of the ocean between the sky, I myself could feel drying lips as a desert, overwhelmed by thirst, a stretch and dehydrated skin with a touch of roughness on the broken body. I can taste the perspiration on my own lips, as I felt heavy in my head as well as pain all over the rest of mine. My eyes slowly closed itself when all of my consciousness faded away.
I knew this would be my last moment. In my relentless dream, I could still hear other crew on a ship. Sometimes when they were talking, some of them cried out for me. Then I heard nothing ever again afterward.
Unconsciously awakened by a warm heat from the sunrise on the east,
I found myself stranded on the unknown island somewhere in the Bengal Sea, after my life raft was swept away by a current.
Eventually the current, along with the winds, had me stranded on the undocumented island out of nowhere. When I wander around the island, searching for any sign of remaining civilization,
I use some of the palm juice to clear my drying throat to save myself from dehydration and hunger.
it seems like there has never been any humans that have ever arrived at this mysterious island, a major reason why there is no any document or myth about it in any memories of mine. While I wander around just to find some group of crustacean lifelessly lying on the beach, as well as many other species of marine animals, whether fish,
Mollusk, isopod, others, crustacean carcass.
even coral reef stranded on the beach all over the island. It sent a horrendous smell from it to my olfactory nervous, the strangest thing ever. Since I had arrived at this island, I saw no sign of living beings on this island, whether birds or any other form of life. After a while in the early afternoon, where the sun is now in between the sky and horizon, an exact moment of desolation, I found the enter in front of some cave-like natural formation, which I saw a light figure came out from within. Deep inside, I have found something that left me questioning my own thought, processing the collective mind, a shape of humanoid sculpture reflected in the darkness from a blue candle's light show it exotic details. From what I could see, they were made of clay, with grey stones scattered around it on something which appears to be a shrine. The details of each sculpture could be described in the grotesque imaginary, which most of them have a humanoid-like figure, but the most bizarre things with the head of a fish. A humanoid figure creatures in depiction of human-like bodies with a fish head, as well with a giant glowing eyes like a deep-sea marine fish. It has fish-like scales cover the grey-black skin with a heinous, untidy, sharp teeth in its mouth. Not just a sculpture of a humanoid fish creature being found. On a cave wall, there's a painting depicting a group of creatures gathered around what appeared to be something likely to be a great temple surrounded by an ancient citadel in an acropolis covered by a colony of kelp. The light from a blue fire reveals a disturbing details of the art on the cave wall, illustrated a vision of horror, a nightmarish being that gather around thing which appeared to be a temple. Over it has a depicted paint of the abomination which, from what my mind could process, are being worshipped by other creature at the bottom while feasting on its meal, and exact humans. The horror I had witnessed right in front of my eyes couldn't be described in any form of any sentence. Right about the time that I decided to leave the place behind, a school of abomination has risen up from the ocean, feasting on a pile of fish carcasses at the marine graveyard.
I have to spend the night hiding from the monsters that keep rising from the bottom sea.
Along with its hideous-looking eyes, its shape looks exact like in depiction. A smell of salty water as well as fish carcass also make myself want to throw up after an hours before it get back into the ocean. That night I decided to spend a time on the island until dawn has arrived. A local fisherman discovered one of the missing crew on a life raft in the ocean while on a boat for catching fish at the early morning in the days after rescuers searching for a survivor from a ship that was sunk by the storm a couple days earlier. When I was rescued and being sent back into the mainland for a medical attention while on a hospital bed, I couldn't forget about the unforgettable picture that strange out of a nightmare in the night on the island. The amount of stress, fear, and horror I had witnessed are too much to bear, as I kept myself in silence of the day while look out at the windows, watching the sun rise up and goes down along with parallel blue sky and a vision of the city from hospital stories. Feeling uneasy as the day goes by, I keep feeling myself had died on the island since that night of terror to never be the same. A nightmarish illusion in my mind kept me awake at night. I wish for myself that I could have kept my eyes closed, only to be awakened by the imagery of those abomination creatures in my dream. I better not want to be awakened by them any longer, only wish to be paralyzed in the deep silence of the ocean to never see the daylight ever again. Next story, It Lurks. As of writing this encounter happened 2 nights ago. I'm going to start this out by saying that recently I've developed a habit of taking late-night walks. This night was no different. The night was calm, starlit, and held a slight chill. Nevertheless, I threw on my hoodie, grabbed my phone plus headphones, and stepped outside.
Instantly I felt relieved.
Walking down the road towards the forest, I switched on my music, putting my playlist on shuffle.
A gentle breeze blew past me, carrying the scent of damp leaves. I didn't mind, though.
It just put me further at ease. At this moment, I had yet to feel that something was amiss, so I was relaxed.
On guard, but relaxed.
After 5 minutes of walking, I reached the small forest that was located by my home. Guided by the bits and pieces of moonlight that shone through the near barren trees, I made my way to the fallen tree that I liked to sit on. Tonight, like all nights, I laid on my back, resting on the fallen tree and watching the stars.
That's when it happened.
The atmosphere shifted, crickets and nightlife going silent.
Even the wind stopped. Immediately I sat up, a sense of unease washing throughout my body. I had to leave now.
As quietly as I could, I hopped off of the fallen tree and began making my way through the moonlit forest, towards the road, towards home, towards safety. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, a feeling of dread sinking deeper and deeper into my stomach. The longer I was in the forest, the stronger a primal terror spread throughout my body. Forcing myself to walk, I kept myself at a constant pace, being as silent as I could, which wasn't very, due to there being leaves littering the forest floor. Given a good amount of them were damp, but not all of them. Those that were not damp crunched under the weight of my body. Pushing towards the road, I came within view of the big, fallen log. The scent hit me before I saw it.
A reeking, rotting stench that seemed to cling to my skin and fill my nose. That's when I saw it.
The source of my primal dread. It was hunched over behind the log,
blocking my way home.
blocking my way to safety. From what I could see, it was incredibly pale and incredibly humanoid, yet there was no mistaking it. This was not a person. It had not yet noticed me, which was relieving.
And I intended to keep it that way.
Seconds after that thought entered my mind, its head snapped up, looking in my direction. That was when I got a look at its face.
Very human-like, yet it was incredibly otherworldly.
The first thing I noticed was its eyes. Well, its lack of discernible eyes. All I could distinguish were hollow pits that held an abyssal darkness deeper than the darkest nights. Yet I could feel their gaze on me, watching, waiting for my next move. The next thing I noticed was its mouth, a mouth full of jagged, yellowing, sharp teeth. Then it stood. It easily towered over me, standing at least 7 feet. I could count each rib. It looked like it hadn't eaten a day in its life. It looked hollow, yet you would be able to easily tell it possessed strength far beyond what it looked capable of. Conveniently, the song Old Doll by Bluera Sai began playing in the one headphone I had in.
Fitting for the mood, right?
We stood there, as if neither of us expected to see the other there. Its hand rested on the tree that it now stood behind. 5 fingers, each elongated and ending in what looked to be razor-sharp claws. This thing was accustomed to killing, made for it, you could tell. Its head tilted, and suddenly I felt its gaze shift from me and onto something behind me. Without a sound, it darted from behind the tree, racing past me and towards whatever was behind me. I took this chance to book it out of there. Risking a glance behind myself, I found out what it had been looking at.
A lone buck now fallen.
Looking forward once more, I made it to the road and speed walked home. As soon as I entered my home, I shut the door behind me, locking it.
I believe that deer was what saved me from what could have been a very bad, very nasty encounter. I know what I saw and I know what it was.
If not for that deer, I may not be here. The very next morning, as I was at the bus stop, waiting for my bus to school, I saw a deer.
Not just any deer.
It seemed to be the same deer, the same buck.
Even from a distance, I could make out how wrong it looked.
Its limbs were bent at the wrong angles, its flesh seeming loose. Some deep part of me knew that this deer was what I had seen not even 6 hours ago. There are things here that are not of this world. Some are benevolent, some malevolent. All I have to say is be alert, and most importantly, trust your gut. Remember, it lurks.